Hello everyone, I am Red Riding Hood Minion, and today I'm going to be briefly discussing a film that I was the main star of. It's nice to have adaptations that are done by me, but unfortunately this one was definitely not a worthy adaptation. Now, I am more than willing to accept the fact that Red Riding Hood's source material obviously can be changed in order to suit an adaptation. That is definitely no problem, especially considering the fact that my story is not really all that long and is thrown in with things like symbolism um, and different concepts as opposed to just being a straightforward kind of story. I mean, it is straightforward in the sense that it is for kids, but at the same time, there are things that kids probably won't understand unless they read into the symbolism of certain concepts. But regardless, Red Riding Hood. There are certain things that I would have done to make this adaptation better. And I think since I'm Red Riding Hood, it's pretty much my job to go over the reasons why and things that I would change. Now, what are the huge issues that I have with this film? Well, this film's pacing is pretty off. It follows pretty much like a Twilight film because the pacing goes from being fairly slow to speeding up really fast. And that's already just by the visuals alone. So visually, it's a very unbalanced film in that sense, in that it doesn't know really how to take itself seriously. And so there are just certain points where it comes off as just very uneven, and that's just from a visual standpoint, just with the pacing, because you'll see it at points where it's slow and then it speeds up. Now, this is pretty much the ultimate thing that I think makes this film pretty awful: the writing. The writing of this film follows itself a lot like a Twilight film, in that the writing does not hold up, especially with the characters, because the characters are not all that compelling. And that is why we get a very sappy love triangle, which takes up the not I don't want to say the majority, but it takes up a good chunk of the film. And as a result, we get underdeveloped characters and we get bad acting. I think there could have been definitely some other actors that could have taken the helm for this film. I mean, if the film was able to get Gary Oldman to come in, I think they could have gotten some other people that could have pulled something off. But definitely it needed to have better writing behind it. Otherwise, there's just no way that the actors would be able to pull off the effect that a good film could provide them, and a good script could. So that's definitely, I think, a huge issue. And yes, this film has one thing though that it does well, although it's almost butchered, but the concept of the werewolf, making it a werewolf mystery film, I think definitely works. Except the film butchers this, and I'll explain how it does that. But really, at the essence of the plot, it's about this village who is attacked by a werewolf, and throughout the entire film, everybody in the village is trying to figure out who the werewolf is. And then Gary Oldman comes in, and he's like a werewolf hunter, and he sort of basically says it could be any one of the people living in this village. It has to be one of your own, because there's not a village for miles and miles and miles on end. And it tries to emphasize too that it takes place like in the Middle Ages or so. So this is fairly plausible, I'd say. But that's really the essence and the idea behind the plot. But the problem with that is that it ultimately doesn't follow itself through on being a good mystery. And why? Because who ends up being the werewolf is not given a whole lot of development and a whole lot of screen time. And you don't really understand why ultimately he decides to, or you don't really know the circumstances behind him becoming the werewolf. You don't understand what ends up going on with that portion of the plot because it's just sort of shoehorned in at the end. And that's a huge problem because you need to, what good mysteries do is they create a sense of plausibility, while also at the same time making it possible that multiple people could plausibly have committed a crime. And with this one, you really don't know the whole time, like it could be anybody. They don't try to narrow it down until a little bit later on in the plot. And even then, it's not all that well done because, again, those characters aren't given, enough context. So, that's something that I think could have been executed a whole lot better. I think what could have been done is that they could have had it where the father could have still ultimately been the werewolf, and by father I mean father of me, Red Riding Hood, or aka Amanda Seyfried in this case, and they could have had him be the werewolf, but ultimately there needed to be a reasoning and a whole explanation as to how he became a werewolf. I think this explanation could have been given to the idea that maybe the grandma is like a witch or something, and she turns him into a werewolf at a young age, and basically he goes around maybe stealing things and maybe killing people in the process, so that that the grandma can have maybe some kind of wealth, or there had to be some kind of, full-blown explanation as to how he became a werewolf and what are the circumstances into him being a werewolf. And again, they could have done something to that effect where they had, the grandma, technically my grandma, Red Riding Hood, they could have had her be maybe a witch or something, and she's trying to sort of cause havoc with the town. Maybe she has some bias against the town or against maybe some people who are maybe more well off or something like that. There could have been a whole explanation as to why she ultimately wants to seek some kind of revenge associated with the town and its people. And the whole werewolf explanation, I think, could have made a little bit more sense, of having a werewolf, having her son turn into a werewolf and be, the terror of the town. And then everybody's thinking, oh, it's the werewolf that's causing all of our problems. And it's like, yeah, it is, but who's really the culprit into creating this werewolf? So there could have been, again, a little bit more development, a little bit more of an explanation like that. That could have worked. But just shoehorning the father as being the werewolf last minute in this movie did not work at all. So, and some people, I know, people get mad at the love triangle thing, and yes, it's something that we've seen over and over again, but again, that could have been executed a whole lot better too. You could have had a lot more development with the main character, with Amanda. She could have, Amanda's character, Red Riding Hood, she could have come off at first as, this innocent, sweet little girl, And then she grows up, and then she learns to sort of be the person to ultimately solve the crime, and or takes it upon herself to solve the crime. Because again, like there, even within the film, it shows like her sister being murdered. I mean, that would give her definitely an explanation as to, you know, figuring out who this freaking werewolf is. But no, throughout the entire movie, she's just figuring out what dude is gonna be her man, and that wouldn't be a problem had they executed it well, but they don't execute it all that well here. And what they could have done is, instead of having this stupid love triangle and then forcing in bestiality here, you know, they could have just had it where, you know, she ends up falling for this dude. He ends up becoming, you know, sort of her right hand and try to figure out who killed somebody. You could have had Gary Oldman's character come in too and kind of say, haha, I know much more than you puny people do. And he sets up a whole team of people to go figure things out. But Red Riding Hood maybe doesn't really trust them, and thinks they're in it for their own selfish needs, because again, maybe the town gives them money or something to go and look for this werewolf or whatnot, or, you know, or maybe he gives really like false information, or, you know, they could have done something interesting like that to give the plot some context. And I think that definitely would have worked. You know, you could have had an interesting duo between her and one of the boys. I mean, pick either or, it doesn't matter. They have no personality, but give her development, give her right hand man some development, and have them go off and figure out who the werewolf is. That could have been really the essence of the story. And yes, I think though that's really though ultimately all I can really say about this adaptation and what I would have done with it. I think it's just one of those adaptations that falls into that unfortunate Twilight ripoff category. But at least I felt like it could have been something a little bit more than what the Twilight really adaptations could have been. But at the same time, I still feel that, you know, there could have been some things that could have made it an interesting murder mystery horror film, because this is what it really was trying to bring out the horror of this, because again, there is a lot of violence, although it's really PG-13 kind of violence, it's still there, and it still focuses in on that horror-filled aspect to it, and, you know, it kind of looks a little bit like the Brothers Grimm, if you've seen that film, even though I don't think that film's that great either. But again, at least it had a story and at least some characters that had personality. This film, unfortunately, has none of those, and the things that I would have suggested, from improving the pacing to enhancing the character development to making sure that there's a full-blown explanation as to behind the circumstances of the werewolf, but while at the same time maybe leaving open some things to interpretation, and giving a more complex idea, like, again, you know, the werewolf's the main villain, but there's still somebody else behind the scenes from that. That I think would have been a lot more interesting. But I'm sure there's others who have various different opinions on this. I'd be more than happy to hear them out. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all later on. I don't know if I'll be back for another video this month. Maybe, maybe not. All depends what Evil Twin Michelle has in store for me. But I'm sure that the other minions will also do a pretty good job in explaining what they would like to explain. But thank you so much for watching. And I'll be off to my grandmother's house because she needs some nice food, and hopefully there's no werewolves, and if there is, I'm not gonna fall in love with one of them. Just saying, I'm not into the whole bestiality thing. But thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.